Hey, y'all, welcome back to the show. If we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And today we're super excited about our guest, the great, the amazing Rachel Mottern. So, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of start from the beginning of how I arrived into the special ed world. My mom actually was really concerned because she couldn't understand when I was like 3, 4 years old. She couldn't understand my speech. She couldn't understand what her child was saying, right? So she was up late at night crying about it. I was frustrated because I knew my mom couldn't understand me, right? And of course, typically these things all kind of go together. So that speech language impairment early on with, of course, was kind of the precursor to later having dyslexia. So by third grade, I still hadn't learned how to read. I was, sitting in third grade reading, Bob books and pretending to read Junie B. Jones. And I was very good at, holding the book up and daydreaming, looking in the book. I wasn't reading, I was daydreaming the stories, right? But I was quiet. And so it really went, they didn't test me for special ed until third grade. And then in fourth grade, everything changed. I had an amazing, phenomenal special education teacher, Miss Deborah Scott, and she was the one who told my parents that Rachel has dyslexia. And she's like, I had it too. I have it too, right? And my dad's like, oh, so that's what I had all these years, right? And I know that the frustrating thing for my dad is, he told the kindergarten teacher and the first grade teacher, like, hey, I had problems with reading. Like the chances that Rachel's going to have it, are high. We already know we have the speech and worked through that. And everybody, I wasn't a behavior problem, right? And I'm also really bright. And until you get to the higher grades, kind of the wait to fail. And I was sitting in fourth grade and those Bob books, right? And Miss Scott, within 2 years of being in that resource, just pull out special ed setting, I was back on grade, like I was on grade level for the first time by the end of fifth grade. And then by middle school, I was in advanced classes and reading above grade level and, had found Twilight and, the young adult fiction and was off to the races, right? Um, and so that really carried with me. I wanted to be what Miss Scott was for me for other children. And so I went on to the University of Tennessee and got my undergraduate degree in deaf and hard of hearing, special education, um, with a minor in psychology as well. And then I went on, I just had to keep learning because I wanted to be the best teacher I could be for my future kiddos, right?
Right.
Um, I went earned my master's degree at Vanderbilt, which, not to toot my own horn, is the #1 institution in the nation for special education, right? So I was definitely very highly trained and excited to walk in to the classroom and teach kiddos. And I was really gifted with the opportunity to get to work with some of the greatest minds in the field who are putting years of that research into special education, and to have the opportunity. And then very quickly into starting teaching within just a few months of the job, realizing I was one of the most qualified people there to work with kids who have behavior needs, right? Or even when it came to conducting IEP meetings. I remember like the teacher that was assigned my first year teaching, that was assigned to be like my mentor teacher to kind of show me the ropes. She, after the first IEP meeting with me, she sat in and gave me feedback, and she's like, I have no feedback to give you. It sounds like you've been doing this for 10 years. You're great. At
That's
the time, I
awesome.
was like, well, okay, we got this, right? And looking back at it, it's like this is supposed to be my mentor teacher, and I want to grow. I want to be the the best person I can be, right? And to not have any feedback from somebody who'd been doing this for 15 years at that point in time, right? And so I just, and then another great like example, right? Because Vanderbilt, they get you on, they love graphs. They teach you graph everything, all your data, graph behavior, academics, love a graph. Had to buy the graphing software, right? And I remember presenting graphs to a special ed coordinator, and she's like, I need you to put those in charts, something that everybody can understand. It's like, oh, I didn't know I thought a graph would make, more sense. So it was just very quickly when I got into the field, a lot of that wonderful foundation I got from Vanderbilt was getting contradicted, right? Um, and then I spent a few years teaching at a private school here in Atlanta, the Atlanta Speech School, and I taught third grade children. There's about 10 kiddos in my class each year, and they all had dyslexia. And of course, a lot of them also had ADHD, as you know, it runs together. And that's also where I received a lot of they flew me out to California for this really multisensory phenomenal math training. That was really good. And really helped bring that multisensory element into math. They also had a great system they wanted all their teachers certified in that Wilson reading system. So they had somebody who was certified to train teachers, training everybody in the building. And so there were definitely some great opportunities when I was at the speech school to really continue to build that knowledge that I was kind of missing when I was in public school those first years. And then I just still really felt a calling for special education. And even though I was still doing special education, still a little bit different at private school, I just really wanted to be with the kids I knew who needed me, the me's that were back in public school.
Right.
And so I went back, and it was just kind of more of the same thing of, this is how we do it. And when you question that, you're told we're not going to say that in the meeting. Oh, mom's happy. We're not going to say that in the meeting. Right. And it just kind of got to my point where I started asking questions of like, this is not how I had learned how to do these things. And I saw you on TikTok, and you were one of the first advocates that said something really reasonable. You're like, I don't want my special ed teachers running around with clipboards all day. And the one other advocate I'd really dealt with at that time, that was exactly what she was having us do, right?
Yeah.
And so it just goes back to what you say of like, we have to get it right for the child. Everything else is wrong. So even if you don't have, like, you need an advocate who can sit there and really navigate the table and not just create demands that are not meaningful, right? And that's what really
Right.
led me to, you know what, if she can do this and have this 20-year career, I can do this really well, and and really be able to get it right at the table and bring everybody together and really have that collaborative but firm approach that you do. And so yeah, I found you on TikTok. I fell in love with it all, and here we are.
Yeah. So kind of tell us. So obviously you're a voracious learner. I always wonder in your story is Miss Deborah Scott still around?
Yeah, so what's actually really sweet is when I left the private school to go back and teach in public school, I actually found out that she was still teaching, and I applied to the school that she was working at, and the last 2 years that I was teaching, I got to teach like with her. Not like
Oh,
co-teach, but like in the building with her, and I
oh,
got to
that's
have lunch with
fantastic.
her.
That's
Um
awesome.
and it's so precious, because it was fun to see her do Fun Friday on Friday. She had that routine, but it works. It works for her kiddos, right? It worked for me. And so just to really get to see the other side of it, and kind of just have that full circle moment with her as well.
So obviously you invested a lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of funds towards your collegiate, you know, training, correct? So what do you think? Do you think it was just where you were teaching in Georgia? Do you think it was specific to that area? Or is it just you were walking into a business and what they do is the way they do it, and that's that?
Yeah, so I definitely, because I did a lot of like practicums and student teaching at the University of Tennessee, and also of course while I was at Vanderbilt is where I really did a lot of my student teaching. So I saw a little bit of, I will call it, the cracks there too at times. But once again, I was so blessed with at Vanderbilt who they paired with me as my mentor teacher while I was at Vanderbilt doing that student teaching. She's phenomenal, and she's actually Miss Tamara McLean. She actually is the teacher that they do a lot of the Iris interviews with,
Okay. Yeah.
right? and so, she really showed me the ropes of how to do this, like, effectively and do your best for kiddos, but also be able to go to sleep at night too, right? And not be working 24/7. Um, but to bring it back to you, I always thought for a long time that it was just the districts that I worked in, right? Until I became an advocate and I just saw it from coast to coast.
Yeah.
And it's everybody. Like, it keeps you up at night to know that it just wasn't just my district that's like a hot mess, right? That
Right.
it is, from Georgia to California, you know?
Yeah. So you saw Special Education Academy, you saw me on TikTok, and so tell us what made you decide to. Obviously, you have this amazing pedigree. Um, what made you decide to and take the 2-day training?
I really wanted to have, as I've kind of mentioned, I had a student that had an advocate and was kind of navigating that. I was really curious to have a better understanding of everybody's role at the IEP table. Like, I thought I had had a fairly good foundation, and just the way I'm trying to think of how to like describe it. The way how leadership responded to the advocate was just a lot of yes, 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 yeah, um, instead of more of like collaborative discussion. Is this really what is most appropriate for the child, or is this just what
Right.
the parent wants, or what the principal doesn't want to step on toes, right? Um, so I just lost my train of thought. What was your
So
original
I mean, so one
question?
of the reasons you took the training was so that you could better interact with advocates, right?
Yeah, I wanted to just have a better, more understanding, and then also there was just a part of me that I really wanted to know if she was good at her job or not, right? Like, is this the only way to do this? Where you've, you know, kind of come in here, it's not collaborative, it's aggressive. Like, I can't even finish my sentence because she's just interrupting, and twisting, like truly twisting your words before you can even get them out, right? Um, and I just remember emailing, if I take your training, will I know, how well this advocate knows what she's doing or not? And the response I got was yes. And I was like, okay, here's my credit card, right? And like we've talked about, when I signed up for your training, I saw the agenda and I saw that, okay, the first half of the day for the first day is all eligibilities. This will be 3 or 4 hours of snooze fest, we know that well. And within the first 45 minutes, I was like, man, this is the best training I've had on, eligibility categories since. It was just so refreshing. And it was also just the perspective of the real and rawness and truthfulness that you brought to the table, of that balance of keeping the expectation, but also being realistic that the framework isn't there for that expectation, right? And how to navigate the
Right.
elephant in the room.
Yeah, I think people just think if they have, and I thought it initially, if I just go in there and just read off 300.115, they're going to go, thank you for letting us know that. We'll do it. And that certainly has to be your foundation, but that's not really what gets it across the line. Um, so I remember when you took the training, and it's always such an honor for me to train people that went to college and graduated, because I think we all know I'm a college dropout, but I'm not a quitter. I've dropped out of a lot of colleges. And so, mine was just sort of baptism by fire and self-taught. So you took the 2-day training, then you took the mastermind. So if you were a teacher, why did you take the mastermind after the 2-day?
I really wanted to know more of like, I was just so captured by how impactful the 2-day was, and like how much it just sat with me after. Like, I started, because a lot of it is, I knew a lot from Vanderbilt that it's very child centered. Like, we don't necessarily go too much into like the federal code per se, but overall that, the law is very child centered and how we write these things, right? Um, and it was just so refreshing to be with somebody like you who like understood it, and understood the realities, and the shortcomings of what we're dealing with every day. And so I was just like, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to know more. I felt like I could definitely see how I've been gaslit, and I wanted more enlightenment, of how to navigate of that, right? And it was just also after the 2 day, just sitting in other meetings and asking questions, and being told that, I need to stop asking so many questions in meetings, that I just couldn't shake it, right? So it was kind of like you were kind of this precipice or catalyst of, I knew it was time. It was such a big jump to make, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, let me just take the mastermind, get my toes wet. Maybe that just having the knowledge will kind of be, at least give me the confidence to do what I can for the kiddos on the inside, right?
Right. So I think I remember between the 2 day and the mastermind, I could just see you all skipping into school with your new knowledge and you're going to share it with your friends. How did that go?
Well, so my best friend and coworker special ed teacher, she like loved it. She was like all of, she's like, oh, so we were really right to think that. Oh, so we really did do the right thing, even though it made everybody uncomfortable because we told the truth. I was like, yeah, we did, you know, um, and but it made a lot of other people uncomfortable, when I would point out like, you know, when their present levels is 2, 3 paragraphs, and they kind of ask for my input, and I would give it back, right? Like, they're, oh well, no one's gonna really notice or ask questions. I was like, well, okay, so it's people that would come to me for things previously, and now with even more knowledge, it kind of, I think they felt like suffocated in a sense of, the gap was already, I already was so knowledgeable, and now it was like I was also not just sharing the information but trying to hold them accountable, but not like me like running through, with a sword accountable, but just like,
Yeah.
hey, not only, is this how you do it, but this is what happens, if we don't do it, and this
If
is
we
how
don't do it, yeah.
you're legally you're in trouble at the end of the day. It's your license on the table when we don't. And it made people really uncomfortable to be able, like, to actually be able to tell them like this is what would happen,
Yeah.
um if it ever made it to due process, right? And everybody in the higher ups would always, they don't tell you things, right? They kind of prep you, give you some phrases.
Some
It'll all be
phrase.
good. You're doing great, Modern. Get in there and keep going, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think you told me a story about, I think it was an evaluator, and then she asked to speak to you afterwards. Can you share that story?
Oh, yeah. So this was like right after I finished up the mastermind, with you in the spring, and I was sitting in an eligibility meeting, and really how my district did it is I've only sat in a handful of eligibility meetings. They typically had the lead teacher of special education kind of navigating those. And then once the kiddo has an IEP, is in special ed, right? So I was only in a handful of eligibility meetings, until becoming, an advocate. Now I feel like, it's at least one a week, right? Um, and I just asked a question about this kiddo was an English language learner, and the school psychologist had given her, y- like, the WISC and then a nonverbal IQ measure, and I was just really concerned with how, with the numbers and what they look like and what they would mean to the untrained eye who didn't read the sentence that said she's an English language learner. We have to take this with a grain of salt. Like, if they didn't read that sentence and they just
Right.
saw those numbers, that she would have a one-way ticket to a different placement in a year or two, right? And it really made me uncomfortable. And so I was just sitting at the table knowing I'm about to serve this kiddo, and I just kind of asked a question of like, hey, is there not like a Spanish IQ test we could give that would give us a better understanding of her cognitive profile? And the school psychologist kind of gave me in the meeting, and then, she kind of just pivoted and, dismissed it of, this is, how, we do it. And this, and because of this trend here and this trend here, we know that there's X, Y, and Z, right? Like she definitely had her language to convince. So that's what she said in the meeting. I didn't really think about it again because I was just asking a question and, that kind of thing. And then days later, she finds me in my office, comes to my office, like, hey, can we sit down for a second? I'm like, strange. I've never had such a long conversation with her in all these years working here. And she's like, hey, you can't ask questions like that in a meeting. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't know what she's talking about. I was like, what do you, she's like, when you
What kind of questions? Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I was like, I can't ask questions in a meeting. And she's like, you can't, she's like, you're welcome to ask me all the questions you want privately, but when we're in the meeting, you can't ask questions like that. We don't want to leave the parents thinking that, or leading them to think that their child might have had an unfair evaluation. And my response to her was, well, did the student have an unfair evaluation? Because, I'm, as the direct service provider, I'm the one who's supposed to take this information and use it to teach her. And I needed a more clearer understanding and a stronger picture of her cognitive. And I was like, is there any, like in the district where, she could have some, like, is there a more appropriate evaluation method? Like maybe doing an
Right.
IQ test in Spanish, right? And she just kind of gave me this is how we do it. There are very rare circumstances where, they might do a Spanish IQ test, but those are very rare and unique circumstances. This is how we do it, and this will tell you enough. Didn't
Yeah.
tell me enough.
Right. And so, that's the whole point of having these stakeholders, right? The federal stakeholders, is because everybody has a different purview, they have a different skill set, knowledge, and we take all of those great people and we benefit the student, right? But, one of the things I heard a very long time ago when I started training people, and the bulk of the people I train are school-based members, is she said, we are prepped and hushed. And so I wish that wasn't true, but I hear it from coast to coast. But I can't imagine my coworker telling me I couldn't ask questions in well, then why am I at the meeting? Why don't we just put like one of those little things at the Oscars, like a foam cutout of Rachel? The whole point is our input is valuable. So, did you find that to be systemic, or was this specific to you and your great wisdom?
I mean, it was also, a few days later, then I had known, it was a few days later with OT, I kind of ran into a similar problem. So, I had known from taking, your training that if a parent, once a student's in special education, if a parent requests testing for some, like an OT evaluation, that, it's granted, right? And I was a veteran teacher at this point. I'd worked with a kiddo, it's March. I'd worked with a kiddo all year. I definitely had tried different handwriting interventions and, and supports and those pieces of it. And so I kind of went to my immediate supervisor, if you'd call him, lead teacher special ed. I was like, hey, I'm going to bring up at the meeting, this area of need, this deficit, right? And talk to the parent about, an OT evaluation, right? And I gave them the kind of the heads up, and they're like, okay, yeah, if it's a need, go for it. And we all agreed at the meeting, all the required members that were present, that this kiddo needed more support, right? And mom then asked for the OT evaluation. I made sure that mom knew to ask for that OT evaluation, right? And so then because they won't just let me print the form off to sign for consent, right? So I have to email the occupational therapist and be like, hey, so we just had a meeting. Mom requested this, get it to me, I can get it to mom, right? And the OT sends me back the email, and it's like paragraphs of like asking questions. Did you try this intervention? I don't see an IEP goal for, writing, we have to have that in there. And it was just this laundry list of all of this nonsense that she wanted done before we're going to consider an evaluation, right? And so, part of my dyslexia, I'm much more, stronger and quicker verbally. So we're, if I'm writing a novel email back, so I kind of just gave her that kind of one line of, mom requested, the evaluation,
Yeah.
where where's the consent form? Yes, I have been working with the student. If you'd like to see the data that I have, right? I had a
Right.
binder full of data, right? And so then she comes to my room, and has literally, I let her go on for like 10 minutes before I stop her, but she tells me
Oh,
about, this is the way we do it, this is the process. So, first, like, once you notice that, you let me know, I'll give you some strategies and tools to try. We'll see how that goes. Then we put in a goal, and this is how, we do it, and that's typically the process before we would consider an OT evaluation. And, so I let her do her spiel, and I said, well, mom requested it. So, from my understanding, mom's requested the evaluation. She's expecting a consent form. Are you prepared to tell her that you're choosing to deny her this evaluation? Rachel, I'm not talking about denying anybody an evaluation. I was like, well, it sure does sound like you're delaying one. And she's like, no, I'm just telling you the process. Like,
the
okay, well,
process. Yeah.
telling you the process and how we do that. I was like, well, I'm a veteran teacher. I've implemented these strategies. I've tried numerous things. We as a committee, agreed during the meeting, paired with mom requested the evaluation. We didn't even have to agree. Mom just requesting the evaluation. It's a done deal, right? And she, just was like, well, this is the process for next time. I was like, it's okay. I got 6 more weeks. So, but it's stuff like that. And her big thing, what I saw with was, she was trying to keep her caseload manageable
Right.
for her, right? Um, which, of course, to a degree, I have some empathy for, but at the point where you are delaying and bullying teachers behind closed doors who are trying to do the right thing just to keep yourself comfortable, what are we doing? Like, why is this your profession? Like,
Right.
go sell, Brahmin bags at Macy's. This is not for you. Special ed's not comfortable.
Right.
There's a lot of other things you can do to be comfortable.
Right.
Anyways,
And so that was so you're finishing up the spring semester. I mean, it must be you're newly married. I can't imagine just telling my husband, by the way, I invested all of this and we're gonna pivot. So what was the pivot process for you from becoming an amazing educator to a full-time special education advocate serving families nationally?
so first off, the only kind of comment I ever had out of my husband, was, oh, so much for getting that teacher insurance now that we're married. Yeah, not the case, right? But, outside of that, he was like, yeah, if this is what you want to do, if this is where you feel your calling is headed, he was definitely on board. And then a lot of it was just, um, that I wanted to continue to, like, learn and grow. So I was jumping on the academy, every Monday night for that, weekly professional development, as I call it, and continuing to get that knowledge and just starting to kind of get things in place of, finding how I wanted and who I wanted to kind of build my website and start to create my brand. And then, of course, my big thing, even after the mastermind, I wanted to continue to be mentored by you, and, talking about having other, now known kind of as a VIP, that just for, professional advocates, that mentorship piece, right? So it was kind of bringing all those things together. And I really felt like I was able to make this jump because I had you and this community that you've created. Because being an advocate is such an isolating profession, right?
Right.
And there's not a lot of community, that can lift you up and build you up in the way and the brand that you've created with the Special Education Academy. And you've taken in such an isolated profession and made it a community, and it made me feel comfortable enough that I could jump, right? I could go, teacher land, where you have all these, I don't know if I call it support, but right, you have all these, you're in it together.
Yeah.
um you have all this camaraderie, right?
Right.
To going to being in an office like by yourself. And I definitely think that without what you've created, I would have been three times more uncomfortable instead of just the big, we're jumping from all the structure in the world to no structure at all, right? So really with the community you've built, I was able to overall transition pretty smoothly. And then continue to, to be a part of the special education academy and get to continue to have the boss in my corner, and that mentorship and support piece has really made it overall a pretty smooth transition. The hardest thing I think at first is to you want to take what just because I got so used to special ed coordinators, what they said was law, right? Um, and just off the bat, it was like, you're not telling the truth, right?
Right.
So really having to just kind of work out that you're no longer that in turn, when you're a teacher, there's that nature of, they tell you what to do, you have to do it, right? And to be able to have that ability to be like, that's not true. You and I both know that's not true. We need to do what's right for the kiddo, right? So it was kind of just that balance of, oh wait, you're no longer my supervisor. I no longer have to do your compliance. I can actually just serve the kiddo, right?
Right.
Um, just so knowing they're lying, believing they're lying, and have the confidence to address that elephant in the room, or and not also, lying, but misguided in
Right.
their angle that they're coming from, right? So that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Girl.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. There's so many teachers um who will say, I'm always, if you're gonna switch jobs, come be an advocate. And they say, I can't do special ed anymore. Tell teachers that are listening how this is not what they were living. If they were in there's many amazing school districts everywhere, but if they were in a situation that was, tenuous and uncomfortable and they weren't welcomed, how is this totally different?
Well, so it's kind of twofold, right? Because you're going to continue to not be welcome. No, we're auditors, right? Nobody wants us coming to the table and doing it, right? But I would say most people get into special ed because they have some kind of personal connection, experience,
Right.
empathy built there, right? And so when it's in your blood, it's in your blood. It's very hard to leave, even if you are, burnt out, special ed teacher, and doesn't want to continue this. Um, but it's so completely different because you still get to have the calling of like serving kiddos, but you're not having to deal with that bureaucracy, the same bureaucracy, and every day, right? You're at least getting different teams, you're not having to go see the same principal Monday, Tuesday, and you're at least getting to be in Texas on Monday and Minnesota on Tuesday, and you get just a little bit more variety, and you still really get to serve the kiddos and get to use all of that, years and decades of teaching experience. You get to still apply it instead of, at one point I did kind of just think about walking away and starting an exercise studio, and I could just never let go of like special ed, right?
Right.
Um, and so I think no matter where you are in your teaching journey, if you love kiddos, if you see the inequities that kiddos with disabilities
Right.
experience and live through, and that at all upsets you, like this this is definitely an opportunity. It is not like being a special ed teacher. You don't have to repeat yourself 500 times. You get to say it once and then let the silence soak in.
Yeah.
Um, for sure.
And we can wear jeans every day if we want for free. Nobody's charging us to wear. I've never understood the paying to wear jeans. Like, who made that up? Like, and where is that $5 going? I'd like an audit of that. So, Rachel, it's always a joy to have you. We'll certainly have you back on. So, if people are trying to reach out to you, so Rachel's an amazing advocate. She advocates nationally. Can you give them their information so they could reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can check out my website, www.modernIEPhelp, and Modern is spelled Mottern. You can also email me at rachel@modernadvocacy.com, or you can find me on the Special Education Academy Partners page as well if you want. So yeah, those are different ways to connect.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As always, it's phenomenal to connect with you and to get to share in the camaraderie and experience and the love we have for kiddos with disabilities.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. She's our bouncing baby. We love her. She's so young and so smart, and we're so glad that none of that was invested in her has been wasted at serving families at the highest level. And so, um, we're so glad that you're here. Remember, when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. If you need anything, just reach out to us at specialeducationacademy.com, and we'll see you guys in the next training.